The speech was necessitated by concerns over what many described as the silence of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in times of economic hardships, with prices of goods and services recording daily increments, fuel prices hitting an all-time high, transportation costs out the roof in a depreciating cedi. Critics questioned why Dr. Bawumia, who is the leader of the economic management team and a champion of symposiums in the erstwhile NDC government on economic challenges, was mute. The vice president, in his address, sought to answer questions ranging from what has happened to the economic fundamentals to how the government is solving the current economic challenges. He, however, acknowledged the numerous challenges facing the economy.
Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic changed the economic circumstances of virtually every country in the world. Today, our economy is witnessing rising prices of fuel and virtually all commodities like bread, rice, sugar, sachet water, cement, iron rods, and so on. From Malata Market through Abofor Market to Techiman Market to Takoradi Market Circle to Pando and almost everywhere across the country, prices are on the rise.
Government communications have not spared any opportunity to attribute the worsening inflation rate, depreciation of the cedi, and rising cost of living to challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and recently by the ongoing tensions between Russia and Ukraine. In a similar fashion, Dr. Bawumia outlined how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the country's growth and how Ghana is directly affected by the Ukraine-Russia war.
The data shows that the debt to GDP ratio after COVID increased in the US, the UK, Cote d'Ivoire by 12, 18, and 12.3 percentage points of GDP, respectively. The table shows that Ghana's total debt stock has increased from 122 billion in 2016 to 351 billion in 2022, an increase of 229.6 billion. At the end of 2021, external debt amounted to 170 billion, 38.7% of GDP, and domestic debt totaled 181 billion, 41.4% of GDP. Between 2019 and 2021, Ghana's debt to GDP increased by 17.6 percentage points of GDP. It should be noted, and it is important, that without the 50.1 billion for the exceptional items of the financial sector, the energy, and COVID, Ghana's debt to GDP would have been about 68% instead of the current 80% that it is.
Critics, especially those within the National Democratic Congress, have consistently debunked attempts by the ruling party to blame external factors for the current situation. They have argued that COVID-19 alone could not be a contributor to the debt situation. In an interesting twist, the vice president agreed to the claims that COVID-19 cannot be solely blamed. He, however, added charges on extra capacity of power produced and the cost of financial sector cleanup as causes of the debt situation.
In addition to COVID-19, there were two major items of expenditure. In addition to COVID-19, there were two major items of expenditure that are critical to understanding the evolution of the fiscal deficit and the debt stock: the banking sector cleanup and the energy sector excess capacity payments.
The NDC in Parliament have been on a campaign to ensure the government account for the expenses made in the COVID-19 management. But Dr. Bawumia believes all expenses made during the COVID-19 period were necessary despite their impact on the debt stock.
Ghana has been acknowledged globally for doing an excellent job in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have the strong leadership of His Excellency the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to thank for that. Deaths from COVID so far have totaled 1,445, and the total case count as at yesterday, the total cases in Ghana was at 42 cases. So we have managed the COVID very well.
In recent times, the government has had cause to reduce expenditure by 3.5 billion cedis to help manage the country's fiscal space. Some analysts have argued that government projects such as free senior high school rather should see expenditure cuts, but the Vice President disagrees.
So to put this expenditure of 50.1 billion and interest costs of 8.5 billion in perspective, it is important to juxtapose this expenditure against the total expenditure or releases on some of our key flagship projects, including free SHS, one district, one factory, planting for food and jobs, the development authorities, the Ghana Card, Zongo Development Fund, NAPCO, teacher training allowances, and nursing training allowances. The data shows that over the last 5 years, our expenditure on all of these flagship projects was 15.6 billion Ghana cedis. Over 5 years. And this is compared to our expenditure on those three exceptional items I've just mentioned of 50.1 billion Ghana cedis. The expenditure, in fact, on these three items amounted to more than 3 times the expenditure on the flagship programs in the table that you are seeing.